have to stay connected to, how interoperable these platforms are with one another. I go back to that whole, reframe the conversation of a supplier. How does their technology or their platform help eventually get to some sort of a stackable skill attainment for the end user? At what point will it contribute to getting to there faster, more efficiently, with better fidelity? And I think the ecosystems need to really start thinking about how do we put all of those together in a way in which it's beneficial for the end user. It's a complicated space to play in, but I think if you don't think about things at a holistic level like that, there'll be a tendency to all of a sudden implement something that is so singularly focused that there was no end game that was figured out ahead of time.
Yeah. And that ends up in a lot of frustration. I think a lot of people feel that around vanilla LMSs that never quite lived up to the promise. Can we talk about a little bit of time left to talk about how you see the future of workplace learning in terms of social responsibility? I've heard you talk about this kind of multi-stage life idea. What do you think is our responsibility within the industry to help people be successful in their whole life?
This is a really important topic to me. And I'll start this with a little bit of a story, and then I'll take that into the multi-stage life. So a friend of mine and I started a nonprofit a few years ago focused on providing fitness to underserved youth. And it was primarily in response to this idea that, we were both hobbyist CrossFitters. So we were really into that method of training and fitness. And there was really, it's not like we're going to become some sort of celebrity in that space. So what were we pursuing and to what end, right? And so my friend's a clinical psychologist, and we were really seeing and reading about the research that fitness can have on building confidence. Whether the physical portion of things come first, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see confidence get built in different ways and manifest itself in terms of being confident with speaking, being confident with taking on a new task, being confident with having a new conversation. And that really prompted this idea that, although we were focused on people in the early stages of their lives, and these are kids that are coming out from difficult situations, and we're really trying to help them put them back on track through fitness, if that's something that they want to do, that everybody has, the traditional career is really moving away from, you sort of, you get educated, you have a corporate job for a long period of time, and then you retire. Right. It's really a different way to look at it now. Is it's not so much that we're managing careers, it's that we're managing multi-stage lives, and that there are different components by which people may be coming into corporate work, or they may not come into corporate work at the time periods that most people are accustomed to. I mean, they may graduate from college, they might go and build a skill through an apprenticeship program. They may do something like the Twitch route over time. And, when it makes sense for them to enter into the corporate space, they'll do that. And if it doesn't make sense, they may not. But, there's more of I would say a sprint mentality towards, I'm going to go through and learn a new skill and do it on my own, and potentially go to the corporate space to kind of build that out. And then, I will switch and I'll switch after a 2-year period. I may switch after a 5-year period, but it's definitely not looking like folks are, interested in maintaining 10-year periods of career in certain locations and certain jobs. And I think that's because people really want to have a better balance between both their work and their personal, and the fact that people are they're living longer, right? So there's this need to really think differently about, okay, I'm gonna live longer, and how do I get the best out of that 100-year life, and not think about this in terms of a model that was built for a life with a shorter lifespan. And I think corporations are being asked to recognize this and develop a point of view in service of their people, because there's a lot of resources that corporations can provide and can deploy and can sort of reappropriate in a direction that better fits a multi-stage life as opposed to the previous career. And that can happen in various ways. I mean, the learning investments that we're providing today are one avenue. I think lots of companies are talking about how can they reimagine their tuition reimbursement or disbursement programs. How can they reimagine, loans and loan payoffs and those kinds of things? How can they reimagine giving people time away to learn, or time off to learn, to pursue these credentials and certifications. And I think the reappropriation of those and reimagination of how we manage towards a multi-stage life will only benefit not just the corporations, but then, the folks that come through the corporations and eventually transition on. Because I think that's a hard thing for folks to realize and imagine, is that they may not be with a corporation for that 10 or 20-year career. I think it's a dwindling concept, and it's one in which we'll start to see people potentially boomerang around, come back to corporations, or go off and learn a new skill and leave the company and come back to the company. But I think there's a corporate responsibility to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help prepare people while they're at the corporation to prepare for the now and for the future.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation in an earlier episode with Kelly Palmer from Degreed, who was the first person who introduced me when she worked at LinkedIn to this notion that at LinkedIn, their philosophy was absolutely grounded. Their whole people philosophy was grounded in the fact that they didn't expect that people would stay with them forever, and so they embraced that fact, and their vision was to create a world where people would want to come back at some point in the future, bring those additional skills and capabilities back into the company. It's a really progressive way to think about it. We have time for one last question, Gordon, because we've burned through the clock here. I always like to ask people, is there anything in particular that inspired you to do the work that you do today? A person, an incident, an observation that set you on this path that you're on? Anything you can share with us around that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you don't get into this field by just kind of all of a sudden deciding you want to, become a learning professional at the onset. And I think for me, it's always been a passion area to kind of think about the technology aspects. How can we leverage technology to enabler? I think the people aspects, I've always been intrigued by the business side of things, and then just the coaching and the sporting aspects of things. How can we build teams? How can we build principles by which we can better operate as teams? And I think, for me, it's been like my time early on and recognizing that and spending more time with individuals and helping them understand, how they might be able to learn differently and sort of, I would say, more personalized to their needs, has always given me the continued and renewed interest in how can we do this learning thing better. I mean, we've been operating and evolving it over time, and it's getting better, and there's more ways in which we can enable and help people grow over time. But there's a much larger human aspect to this than there has ever been. I think with all of the technology that surrounds us, it's more important than ever to realize that the human aspect of what the learning and development profession can provide back into the organization is critical. And those that understand the business strategy of the corporations, sort of what's driving the need for our people to be skilled in certain areas, an understanding of learning as a profession, not just the operational sides of things, but to a larger degree the neuroscience side of things, and then mixing that with and how will we need to motivate groups of people to start to build momentum around these kinds of things to make it important to them because it's important to the company. I think is the key, Chris. It's really helping take learning and evolving it to the next level. Us as consultants within the organizations driving a higher order end game for our people, and I think we'll start to see more folks latch onto that and look to evolve their careers, which would be awesome.
Couldn't agree more. And thanks for your work moving us in that direction, because I know you think about it deeply. One last question: where can people learn more about your work and connect with you?
Yeah, pretty easy. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, Gordon Trujilo out on LinkedIn. My profile is sitting out there. Visa experience, Accenture experience, etc. Also on Twitter at Gordon_Trujillo. You can find me there as well. Obviously, all the things that we're talking about, both on the web and also on this podcast, are views into my own. But happy to connect with anybody that's more interested in the topics that we discussed today or anything else.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time today, and hopefully we'll have you back to talk about how things are progressing at Visa at some point in the future.
Awesome, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I thought the future would be cooler. We're sponsoring this episode in the name of Humentum, It's a global membership organization of international NGOs that provides training, convening, and support to organizations that are working for social good. You can visit them at www.humentum.org and support them if you can with donations of time, expertise, learning content, and services. Your support will absolutely help thousands of people who do good work do it even better. Hey, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this edition of Learning is the New Working. We're committed to this being a useful resource for you, so please email me at chris@learningfuturesgroup.com if you have any questions about anything we've discussed today. If you have the time, please take a few minutes to rate us on the podcast platform where you found us. It really helps other listeners find us and get value from the show.
I thought the future would be cooler.